I'm the Australia-New Zealand Sales Manager for Enghouse, Kath Murphy. Now, let's talk about John Cray, who's our VP of Product Management for all of the contact centre suite for Enghouse globally. He's got the responsibility for defining the global strategy and release plans for Enghouse contact centre products. For over 25 years, John has delivered numerous contact centre and CRM products to market, driving over $500 million in software revenue. Prior to this, he directed consulting projects for several years, delivering successful software solutions for telecommunications, publishing, healthcare, engineering, transportation and systems security. John has published articles and papers on topics ranging from the future of contact centres and customer service through to optimising operating system security. John holds a bachelor's degree in physics from Notre Dame and a master's degree in computer science from the University of Illinois. So without further ado, we'll pass it over to John and get into the webinar. John.
Thank you, Kath. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. And echo Kath, thanks everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate your valuable time spending it with us today. So we're going to talk about a pretty hot topic today, customer experience. It's getting a lot of press. A lot of the analysts who cover the space of customer interactions is covering this particular trend. It is rapidly becoming the highest priority for a lot of businesses who are looking to differentiate. So differentiate, the realization is that businesses need that personal touch with customers to be excellent, and that they can differentiate themselves from their competitors by making that experience excellent. We're going to talk about what makes for a great customer experience, so kind of the what side of the equation, and then we're going to kind of talk about the how, how an organization can put in place great touch points with their customers and how they can differentiate. So that's today's topic. So I'll kind of start with a brief story. About a month ago, I was online. I live in a suburb of Chicago, so I was online at home, and we were looking to buy a shed. So my wife and I have managed to stockpile our house with enough stuff that it doesn't actually fit in the house itself anymore. So we were online, and I was looking around for a shed, and I was on one of the big retailers in the U.S., Sears. I was on their website. They sell quite a number of sheds. I picked one out, and it had the right space. It fit into our backyard. Everything was great. And as I was going through the process of investigating a little bit of the technical specs, how you would actually put the shed together, I got a little pop-up on my desktop that said, "Are you interested in installation?" Click here. And being a bit lazy, I thought it'd be nice to have this installed. I clicked there, and a chat window appeared, and I started talking with someone who had visibility into the shed I was looking at, knew about it, knew about how long it would take to put it up, and also had a schedule in front of them to be able to schedule the installation. So it was actually a terrific experience. What was amazing to me was the chat did not come from Sears. It came from a company that was partnered with Sears and actually partnered with a number of other retailers who sold various things that needed installation. So they got a little notification because they had bought advertising space on the same web page that the Sears information was displayed. So I said yes, very interested, and within an hour I had a quote in email kind of fully outlining what it would cost to put it up and outlining the schedule and the whole bit. So it was, for me, an amazing experience, and I shared it. Here's the funny part, was I shared it with my wife. I shared it with a few other people in my age group, and they were like, "Wow, that is amazing, not even Sears, huh?" And it was kind of cool how two companies could be interconnected like that. But then when I told the same story to my nephew, who's in his upper 20s, he was like, "Yeah, and it struck me that the folks that are that we call millennials, or folks that are maybe slightly older than that, have grown up in a world where that's just full of amazing interconnections. You know, Amazon, when you buy a product, refers you to other products you might like. Your DVR recommends shows to you that it thinks you'll like. LinkedIn tries connecting you to new contacts that make sense for you based on who you know. It's just an amazing world of interconnections, and we're starting to become familiar, especially generations that have grown up with this are now very, very familiar with this kind of experience. So it's almost becoming the de facto standard. So what I think I just wanted to use that story as kind of a lead-in to talk about how we can differentiate ourselves from a service perspective in this new world that we live in. So there's a couple of market surveys that we've tapped into here for data about trends. One of them is from a company called Dimension Data. They publish an annual report. In this particular report, they survey over 1,000 contact centers across the globe in, I think, something like 35, 40 different countries. And they collect the data together and they publish it, and they show kind of what contact centers are doing and where they're going and where their priorities are. And there's another survey here done by a company called Contact Babel. This particular survey was done in the US, about 210 contact center managers in the US, again, surveyed on many of the same trends and many of the same ideas. The data survey does actually cost money, but you can get a summary report which has much of the high-level detail of the survey kind of rolled up and summarized for free if you follow that link. The Contact Babel report we subscribe to, so we're a subscriber and we put that online, and you can get to it through that link and go through it to white papers on our own website, the NCHAS website. So a lot of the market data that we have kind of comes from these surveys. Okay, so let's dive in. So what's happening with this whole topic of the customer experience? Well, according to Contact Babel, the survey in the US that was done, the top priorities for improving the contact center, absolutely the #1 priority is customer satisfaction. And it's interesting because this has kind of switched over the last few years. It used to be contact centers were much more worried about cost and productivity, and now they've switched to an emphasis on the customer. And the data survey represents much of the same thing. About 82% of companies have actually designated customer experience, or what shorthand is called CX, as a differentiator for their companies against their competitors. And 77 to 78% recognize CX as the most important performance measure they have in their strategy as an organization. If you think about all the things that they could have chosen over customer experience, they could have chosen, revenue growth or profitability, but this is such a natural connection between those business factors and the experience of the customers that are contacting you that this has become the #1 priority. Just a quick quote here from Frost & Sullivan, another analyst that's based in the US, has said that by 2020, customer experience will overtake everything else, including price and product, as a differentiator for the brand of the company. We've all heard the great stories, from Nordstrom's and Zappos and Disney, right? The stories about, how amazing it is when they deliver great service to their company, to their customers, and how great service can become. So we've all heard those stories, but it can become a reality for every business. There are ways to deliver truly differentiated service. We're going to talk about that. Okay, so let's try to go to the next slide here. So what drives great customer experience? And again, quoting from these market trends surveys, the Contact Babel survey asked contact center managers, what is the factor that's absolutely most valued by your customers? And the #1 thing, and again, this has switched over the years, what is now first contact resolution, the ability to resolve a customer issue on the first try. The definition of what a contact is changing a bit, because now we're seeing the ability to escalate across channels, but as long as that's one stretch of time that falls within a reasonable time period, it's considered to be the first contact. It used to be people said, I'm tired of waiting on hold. That's my number one pain point. But now it's become that getting the issue resolved on the first try. And Data asked their customers, what are the top trends in the market right now that are having a direct impact on your customer experience? And the top three are all related to channels, to the kinds of communication that they support with their customers. The top one, having a strategy for omni-channel, and various definitions of what omni-channel means. But what seems to be fairly prevalent in terms of this, of defining omni-channel, is this ability to connect interactions with customers together across channels of communication. And we'll talk about a couple of use cases for that in a bit. But it's this ability to see, as if I'm an agent or I'm a manager in a contact center, I can see this connected journey and how customers got from point A to point B to get their issue resolved or to get that item purchased or whatever it might be. And then there's a strong trend to migrate from traditional voice to digital. Voice, according to most surveys, and most customers, is still the number one means of communication for most businesses, most contact centers. But there is a steady evolution of migration across to email, text, instant messaging, and other text media. And contact centers are having to respond. They're having to treat those as first-class citizens in their contact centers. And then, of course, there's the move to mobile. Mobile is on fire. The number of mobile connected devices in the world is incredible and increasing dramatically every year. And the amount of traffic on the internet from mobile devices is growing at an amazing rate. So that changing user behavior is something that businesses have to respond to. So we've talked about this concept of omnichannel. Where is omnichannel really in the market? According to the Data survey, 97.8% of contact centers support voice. It's just part of being a contact center for most businesses. It's part of being able to serve your customers. And we'll see a chart in a minute that makes this into kind of a generational thing, but still voice is dominating. Now this does not mean that 97.8% of contacts are over the phone. It just means that contact centers have to support this about 98% of the time. Interestingly, email is supported by about 90% of contact centers. Does that mean that they're blending it together with voice in a universal queue and managing it using the exact same systems? It doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means the contact center is handling email and has one or a group of people who are sitting there watching a queue of emails coming in and responding to them. About 74% handle IVR, self-service. 68% have a website with information for customers typically. 52%, a pretty high number, is doing something with social media in a contact center of sorts. It might be separated into the marketing department, but it is a set of people who are responding to tweets or posts or articles on social media and then getting back to those customers in case there's anything negative or anything that needs some level of responsiveness. 48% are already handling SMS in a queue in a contact center capacity. 44% web chat, and it goes on from there. So there is, you can see the numbers are actually fairly high in digital media, where we're seeing customers coming in through these different channels and contact centers are having to respond. I thought this was an interesting set of data from Data as well. If you look, it's a little bit hard to read. I apologize for the size of the diagram here, but if you look at voice, the telephone is actually, for the under 25 age group, is the fourth most important popular channel, but it skyrockets to first by the time you're in the age group 35 to 54, and it just stays there at that point. The number one popular channel by age for the under 25 set here is social media, but it plummets down to fifth as soon as you go into the 25 to 34 age group. So we're seeing a fairly dramatic difference between the younger age groups and the kind of channels that are most popular in their usage. Let's talk a little bit about omni-channel in the contact center. If you are a contact center that supports omni-channel, does it necessarily mean that you have trained agents that are sitting there that are capable of handling one call 1 minute and then an email or text or instant message the next minute, and are constantly toggling back and forth between these media channels? According to the Dimension Data Survey, the percentage of agents that are handling both voice and text and are trained to do both is only 19.2%. So that's a very interesting number. First, it has grown over time. It used to be a lot lower than that, but it's still not dramatically high. So what does it mean? Does it mean that a contact center shouldn't manage different forms of interactions in a single system? It does not mean that. What it means is that you can choose whether you want your agents to toggle back and forth and be trained up on text media or not. But even if they aren't, there's still a lot of value in a single universal system managing all those different forms of communication. Why? Well, it gives you the connection points. It gives you that customer journey. Even if it's a different agent handling an email than the agent who handled the voice call, you can still see that they're connected together, and you see that complete customer journey. And of course, you can manage service levels. You can manage all the metrics and analytics that you want to see across all those forms of communication, all controlled by your contact center management system. So there's a lot of value in unifying media in a single system, even if you're not unifying it in a single agent experience. Let's take a look at an actual reasonably good omni-channel customer journey. And I chose healthcare as a vertical market for this. You know, I think healthcare represents a nice familiar space that we're all very used to. There's my little patient with the broken arm over there on the left. Let's see what happens with this, with a typical patient interaction in this new omni-channel world. First, if the patient has an appointment with the doctor, the thing that patient is likely to see 24, 48 hours in advance is a reminder of that appointment. And that's fairly prevalent now in most healthcare environments, this sending out of appointment reminders based on the channel of choice of the customer. You know, we saw the different age group preferences. If you're a customer, typically you would want to be able to choose whether you want to receive your reminders by text, whether you'd rather receive them by email, or whether you'd actually prefer a call, maybe an automated call that plays your appointment time to you through an IVR. You know, the choice of channel is something that should be in the control of the patient. But once they get that reminder, maybe they need to look at possibly changing it. You know, so that little link right there in the text message can lead you to a web page or an app or whatever you might have installed on your mobile device that allows you to look up other available appointment times. You know, so rescheduling is a key part, or you can even reply to the text message and ask to reschedule it that way. The key is it would have to go into queue and be handled by someone, whereas if you use the automated system, you're still in the realm of self-service. But let's say you decide you might need to talk to someone live. You know, maybe you're having some pain, or maybe you want to just ask questions about, you know, whether you'd get enough time on a rescheduled appointment to deal with some other issues you have to talk to the doctor about. Whatever it might be, you decide you want to go directly from that scheduling screen into queue, and then in a nice system see your position in queue, and then have a choice of channels there as well. I might be able to instant message or text the nurse and get a reply back, or I prefer to actually physically talk to that nurse. There's all kinds of stories in the market about what if I want to say show the nurse something, so I turn the camera on my mobile phone and I escalate it to a video call, or the nurse wants to demonstrate something back. Video adds a lot of value potentially in a healthcare transaction. So those are the kinds of things that you'd be able to do when you start escalating from a rescheduling to a live call. I finish up with the nurse, and now in advance of my doctor's appointment, I can fill out a form online. One of the pain points in visiting a doctor is having to sit there with a pen and paper and filling out a form over and over again. What if I do that online so that everything is done in advance? I just show up and I go right in, and then of course when my doctor appointment occurs, now I actually have the physical connection to the doctor, and after that appointment takes place, now I get the post-visit results, again, through my mobile device. So this is an end-to-end customer journey, and there's a lot of different things happening here. We got a proactive service type notification that was blasted out to me, the patient, directly from the automated system. I then connected with a web-based system to do the rescheduling, filling out forms, and doing the post-visit results summary. And I also escalated to a live interaction to talk to a nurse. So if I look at the level of automation in this workflow, there are some key parts of this that are actually self-service. I didn't require a live person, and they were completely done by an automated system at the clinic or at the doctor's office. And in this middle section, that's the live service part. But it didn't matter to me as the patient, because to me, it looked like a seamless customer journey. One thing naturally flowed to the next, and even the talking to the nurse, I wasn't aware that that went into some call queue and then went through a PBX to get to a telephone or soft phone on the nurse's desk. To me, it just was part of the same journey, part of the same flow of interactions. So there's a lot of value in that. We've talked about the fact that agents maybe don't commonly handle more than one interaction of different types at once or in the context of their day. But what might it look like if they did? What might it look like for an agent who's, say, handling calls, emails, chats, and so on? Well, the desktop might look something like this. Now, as Enghouse, we're a software vendor, so we're naturally going to show our own product, but this is a product called the user interface called Touchpoint, which is part of a product called Communications Center. And here we're seeing the actual look and feel of the application for the agent. Over on the left-hand side there, we can see various forms of communication that the agent is handling, and they're all displayed concurrently, so the agent can literally toggle back and forth. The value in that is if I'm an agent and I'm handling multiple chats at the same time and I'm waiting for the customer to type or provide some information, I can move to other chats. Or let's say I'm working on an email to a customer to give them more information. There's value in that. There's value in being able to move cross-media. And at the top of the screen, we see the ability to hover over the customer and turn a web chat into a call, or send a text message, or send an email. The key here is that the agent is able to choose the form of communication that is most productive to convey the information that the customer needs. There's a little bit of interesting bit there in the middle, that related interactions. There I can see a little one which tells me there's something literally live in queue right now. Perhaps while I'm working on this web chat, that same customer sent an email in earlier, and I can bring that up and look at it. There's value in that. There's value in being able to see interactions from the same customer, possibly even on the same issue, that are related to each other. So I, the agent, can see that journey, that complete context of what that customer is worried about and how they've interacted with us, in past interactions. even if those interactions were with another agent. And then over on the right-hand side, I can see the context of this interaction. Where did it come from? Was the customer navigating on a mobile device through a form and they're having trouble? Were they transferred to me from someone else? You know, can I get those notes? Can I get that context? And that information may have been filled in by another agent in the form of notes, or may have come from a CRM system or another related system. The key is it's all joined together in one experience, and it empowers the agent to have all the tools and information they need to provide a great customer experience for that customer. So we talk about the fact that, you know, a good interaction in this day and age can be omni-channel. You know, it can escalate across different forms of communication. What do we do, though, as we look at the problem of delivering that interaction or flow of interactions with the highest quality we can? What can we do as businesses, as contact centers, to escalate that quality, to provide the greatest quality experience? You know, the Contact Babel survey rated customer satisfaction and customer feedback as the absolute top characteristic to improve in agents. They rated it as the highest thing they could do to improve their agent performance. And again, that's switched over the years. It used to be about, did agents log in and log out at the right times? Did they adhere to their schedules? You know, how good were they? Even at improving sales conversions is now rated fourth, the ability to upsell a customer with something new. Customer satisfaction, the customer experience in a rating form is rated as number one. And Data surveyed and said, what do you do today? You know, how do you measure quality today in your customers? And about 89% said they do measure quality for phone interactions. We'll talk about how in just a second. But only a little less than half are actually evaluating email and web chat. On a previous screen, we saw that email is used in about 90% of contact centers, but only half of contact centers actually measure quality in an email. So there's a bit of a gap there between the measurement of the customer experience and the actual customer experience itself, the fact of it. So we're seeing a little bit of a gulf there. And so there's an opportunity for contact centers to say, okay, the reality is I am sending emails to my customers. The reality is I am starting to chat live with my customers. I am sending text messages. How do I evaluate their quality? And that's a key part of delivering a more optimal customer experience. How do I actually measure quality? You know, how are contact centers actually measuring quality? We'll go back to the Contact Babel survey here, who asked, you know, what techniques do you use to measure quality in your interactions? And not surprisingly, the number one technique used by the vast majority of customers is call recording. They record their calls. In some cases, a business has to record their calls for compliance purposes. You know, if you're a financial services organization that is delivering promises on, say, a quote for a loan, or on a, you know, maybe you're a trading firm that's offering a particular price point on a stock or a future or something, you have to record every single call because for compliance reasons you have to prove that you lived up to what you said that you would do. But a lot of contact centers, from a quality perspective, are using recordings, and then they go back and they listen to those recordings, and then they evaluate the call. And they can coach agents this way, right? They can record the call, evaluate it, use the best calls as a coaching device for maybe agents that are new to the business, and we can play a great call from a great agent and say, you know, this is the way a call should be handled. And you can even do that for problem customers to say, look how well this agent handled this particular kind of problem, and use it as a coaching tool. But call recording is, you know, a very, very prevalent technique. What about surveys? So surveys are done in some respect by about 70% of the contact centers that were surveyed by Contact Babel. And this just means that at some point in a customer life cycle, they are surveyed. It means that, you know, they may get a monthly questionnaire or an annual questionnaire that says, how's our service? How are we doing? And they can fill out, you know, and hopefully it's a quick survey to fill out, and then the data is collated and used, you know, exposed to the contact center manager, the VP of customer service, as how well are we doing? And NPS, or Net Promoter Score, is a common technique used to measure customer satisfaction with a very simple question: how likely are you to refer us to another company, to refer our business to someone else? And based on the answer to that question on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 9 or whatever, then you can get a score, the Net Promoter Score, and that's used, according to Contact Babel, that's used about 1/3 of the time. So about 1/3 of the people that are using surveys are using Net Promoter Score as the mechanism for evaluating customer satisfaction. Now we're starting to go down the list, and post-interaction surveys, and this is the real-time survey that's done right after a call. Can you please hold on the line to answer a couple of questions about our service? Or after, say, you get an email, or after you're on a website and you get sent to a survey about the level of service that you received. About half of contact centers are using that real-time survey to measure the results and the customer satisfaction from that interaction. And that's an interesting statistic. There's a lot of discussion about the effectiveness of post-interaction surveys, because in theory, the very, very happy customers might stay on the line to commend an agent for their great performance, their great service. The very, very unhappy customers may stay on the line to basically talk about how bad an experience they had. But what about all those customers in the middle that are okay, but not necessarily wowed by the service? Are they likely to stand for a survey? There's a lot of skepticism about whether this technique actually works. Then we go way down the list here. About 16% of contact centers are using some form of speech analytics, historical in this case, where they take recorded calls, play them to an automated speech analytics engine, which diagnoses the level of service based on, did the agent say the right things? What was the tone of the conversation? Was the customer stressed out? Did they sound upset? What did the agent interrupt the customer? There are a lot of factors here that you can analyze with an automated speech analytics system. One of the nice things that some contact centers are starting to do now is they use a speech analytics system to analyze the conversation, and they flag the calls that require a supervisor or manager to then listen to them to do that deeper dive analysis of quality through the recording mechanism. So you can see a connection point often between speech analytics and then someone live being flagged to listen into that recording and do something about it. So, you know, that's a nice little technique, and again, it's still a small fraction of contact centers that are doing this, but it is a nice little connection point between recordings and the new tools like speech analytics. Text analytics is a lot harder. You know, here is where we're getting the tools that are actually looking inside the emails, inside the web chats, inside the SMS texts to see how well the agent did. You know, the obvious things, look for 4-letter words, you know, look for profanity, look for things that would be a flag of really bad service. But there are many other things that you can do. What's the length of the text? How well and effectively was the agent able to deliver an answer in a relatively short burst of textual information? You know, how good a job did the agent do in conveying the information? Did the agent use the common responses that we want that agent to use? Things like that. So about 9%, a much lower number, are analyzing text, and then an even lower number than that are using speech analytics engines in real time, meaning they're listening to conversations as they're occurring and they're flagging supervisors, hey, you better pay attention to this. The customer's getting upset. And coaching the agent in real time to show them what they should be doing. You're speaking too fast. You're not speaking loudly enough. You forgot to talk about this month's promotion. Things like that can only be done if you're analyzing speech as it's occurring. So that's a really nice tool and a really nice way of tying quality into the conversation as it happens. But you can see the prevalence of these techniques goes down dramatically the more clever they get, the more automated they get, and so on. I wanted to talk a little bit about service. I mean, we gave the healthcare example before. And some of this, you know, when you start talking about analytics and things, starts to sound a little bit like rocket science. You know, it starts to sound like, oh, that sounds really, really hard to implement. But if we go back to basics, there are some things that you can do to create a really, really good customer experience by just doing some very fundamental things. So imagine we have a customer who had ordered a replacement part, and that customer is calling into our contact center, and the very first thing that we do is we identify who that caller is. In this case, we use caller ID information, and we recognize that this person is Nate Smith. And here's the key thing. We're able to look Nate up in our CRM system, and we're able to tell that Nate is a platinum customer. Platinum, he's the highest level of customer we have. He's done a lot of business with us. You know, the hotels use this, the airlines use it. We're all familiar with this grade of customer, this being able to say one customer is, for our business, more important than another. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, customers are starting to expect that if they're a frequent customer, they will get a higher class of service. But the key to that is identifying who the customer is. And then when that customer does end up talking to someone live, that person is informed. So let's first identify the customer, and then if it's possible, we might be able to send information to that customer without them having to talk to someone live. This self-service component is a key part of delivering a great customer experience. In this case, if Nate's just calling to see if his part's been shipped, the system should be able to tell him that. He could do it through a website, he could do it over the phone, he could do it via a text message, it doesn't matter. We should just be able to convey that information to him without having to burden a live person or even to force Nate to have to wait on hold for a live person to be available. But if in case that doesn't work, then we need to figure out who the best agent is. Now in this case, Nate is platinum, so we might want to treat Nate better. We might want to put him in a higher priority queue. We might want to make sure his queue is answered ahead of lower priority customers. We might want to get him to the absolute best agent we have, or we even might want to get him to an agent that Nate has a personal relationship with, dealing with that person in our contact center before. And we know that because we know that customer journey. We know the previous interactions Nate has had with our business. Regardless of media channel, we know who he has a relationship with, and we might be able to use that. So here we are going to use that. We're going to use Amber. Amber in the contact center has a personal relationship with Nate. She personally spoke to him last month. So it offers a little bit of a differentiated service if we can connect those two people together and say, hey Nate, this is Amber, remember me. You know, whether or not he actually remembers that particular interaction is kind of irrelevant because Nate immediately gets the impression he's important and the contact center is making that personal touch with him. And of course, Amber needs to see Nate's information at her fingertips as soon as the interaction arrives, even in advance, because then she can prep, she can prepare for that interaction and make it the best possible experience. What if Amber needs help? You know, what if the part that Nate got is not the right part and we need to send a new part and Amber needs permission, in this case from Mary, her supervisor to authorize that a new part gets shipped. That collaboration is another key part of a good contact center experience. Why? Because remember we saw earlier that in the trends, a lot of contact centers are prioritizing first contact resolution ahead of everything else in terms of what makes a great customer experience. So if Amber's able to get Mary involved with Nate in real time to get the part authorized for reshipment, get it off to him, and solve his problem to his satisfaction very quick, then Nate's overall impression of the business will be, wow, I didn't have to call back. They didn't have to go figure out if they could send me a new part and call me back. It all happened right now. So that end-to-end experience between Nate, the automated system, the agent, and the supervisor all happened very seamlessly. It is amazing how many contact centers don't do these 5 basic things. ID the customer, provide self-service, make sure the routing is to the best possible person, make that person productive by integration to CRM and other back office applications, and allow collaboration. You know, a lot of the new tools like Skype for Business and Cisco, Jabber, and all the tools that we're seeing in the market now that are enabling collaboration are not always in use in the contact center, and if they are, they're not always well integrated into the contact center management system. If you can do that, you can provide a truly differentiated experience. How could you make this even better? So if you did these 5 things, that's pretty amazing. You've delivered a great experience. How could you make it even better than that? Add a couple more steps. Remember in the healthcare scenario, we saw that appointment reminder. That's an example of a proactive communication. Instead of waiting for Nate to contact them, what if the contact center would have automatically sent Nate a text message saying your part has been shipped. Click here if you are satisfied, or click here if you're unsatisfied. That kind of experience is proactive and is differentiated because Nate is amazed by the level of responsiveness. He didn't have to do a darn thing, but he found out from the contact center that things were happening on his behalf. And then after the whole process, measure. We saw the techniques earlier for measuring quality. Measure, improve, coach, evaluate and coach your agents to make them better. So this is a key part of a good level of service for a contact center. And there's nothing in here that is particularly way above and beyond. It's kind of the basics, but it does require you to integrate a contact center management system to a back-end automation system to provide data about customers, information that you need, and then to tie that back in for things like self-service and, of course, the quality management system that needs to be integrated here as well to measure and improve. So just do these basically 7 steps, and it is amazing how differentiated your service will be. What did the survey say? What does Dimension Data say is going to happen over the next year? Well, proactive communication that we just talked about is happening in about 31% of contact centers at the end of 2016, but that's going up to 57% according to DI data in a period of a year. So the 1,000 contact centers that they surveyed said that they are planning to go to proactive communication in the next year. Web chat, 44% to 81%. And again, where does web chat happen? It happens basically anywhere, including on mobile devices, which is going from 42 to 75%. Amazing growth that is being projected by these customers. I mean, these are customers answering a survey that said, what are your plans for implementing these techniques in your contact center environment? And we're seeing massive growth in these alternative channels and alternative forms of communication for customer service. It's interesting, we're down to the last couple of slides here, but it's interesting, when you look at the difference between what is important, remember that we said what is really, really important is a high customer satisfaction score. And in the Contact Babel survey, they said that's actually the #1 agent characteristic that's encouraged for their agents. But what's very interesting is that many contact centers are not actually rewarding that as their #1 agent characteristic. It actually drops down to 4th, and the basic things like logging in at the right time of day and showing up on time, as measured, say, by a workforce scheduler or workforce management system, becomes the #1 rewarded characteristic. So yes, of course it's important for your agents to show up on time, but with this emphasis on customer experience, shouldn't what you reward for your agents be the thing that you are trying to encourage in your agents and you're trying to measure as a business? Shouldn't those be lined up? And that's where we're seeing again this gap between expectation or business desire and the reality of what's actually happening. How does the agent fit into the equation? Agents are potentially a cost sink for the business. They are often viewed as a problem, but they're also a great opportunity. If we look at the costs inside a contact center, the cost to pay agents and to train them is almost 70% of the overall budget of the contact center. So if we count everything else, the facilities, the equipment, the telephone system, the web server, the information that the agent gets through a website or an FAQ or a knowledge base, the contact center management system itself, that only amounts to about 30% of the overall budget. 70, almost 70, is just the cost of the agent. And yet the agents can be very problematic. They can take 10 weeks before they're really up to speed, according to DI data. The attrition rate, DI data says it's 21.2%. Contact Babel says it's 29%. These are agents that leave their jobs every single year. And amazingly, the absenteeism rate, agents just simply not showing up, is happening almost 10% of the time. Imagine in a 200 working day year, 20 days of an agent not showing up for their job. Just not showing up. Not scheduled vacation time, but literal absenteeism. What can we do about this? Because this is directly tied to customer experience. If the agents are not happy and motivated, they are not delivering the level of service you need. The biggest bang for the buck is the things we've talked about that are really basic, but really can make a big difference. Remove those routine interactions from the agent's life. Handle those through self-service. Provide them great tools. We saw a screen that enabled the agent to be informed and productive. Provide that screen. Give the agents opportunity maybe to do other things like handle text media, and to be able to deliver more complex customer queries and handle more complex customer requests. Coach your agents, mentor them, continuously improve them, set programs in place, use your best agents to mentor the newer agents, and then, as we saw in the last slide, it's important to reward the right things. If customer satisfaction and the customer experience is the most important part of your business, then make sure your agents are rewarded for delivering that effectively, using the tools we have available to measure quality and tie those tools together into a complete picture. So that's really what we wanted to present to you guys today. Hopefully this was of value, and hopefully you guys have some questions for us. We've got another 10 minutes or so, so please chat your questions in and we'll be glad to handle them at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, John. As John has just said, we're taking questions now, so type them into the chat pane in the GoToWebinar interface. We've had a couple come in during the presentation, so we'll start with those first. So, John, this one's come through. As a contact center manager, what might be the best first step for me to persuade the business executive team to invest further in customer service technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. We see that question all the time, right? Because it's really important to because there is a cost. There typically is some cost. If you have a good omni-channel customer interaction management system, the cost maybe is not high to add new channels of communication. It's not necessarily high to add an integrated quality management system into the mix. So the cost may not be as high as you think, but you still need to cost justify that, and the best way has got to be through some kind of ROI metric, right? Return on investment. You've got to be able to show that if you can make this difference, if you can lower your customer attrition rate by 1% because of better customer experiences, right? Or if you can upsell customers an additional product or service 1% of the time, and use a low number because those are very, very achievable. We have customers who have achieved anywhere between 7 and 10% increases on upselling, anywhere between 40 and 50% efficiency improvements in doing some of these things. When you're delivering a great omni-channel experience, you can eliminate callbacks from customers. You can cut down your interaction volume significantly. It's pretty amazing, the ROI. Tie it to the numbers, and I think the improvements kind of sell themselves.
Okay, we've got another question that's come through, and it's to do with screen recordings. So, John, what about the screen recording of the Enghouse CC product?
Sure. So there are two complementary technologies, that we actually three now. We're launching a new self-service engine here in the ANZ region called Communications Portal. The three technologies that we commonly take to market here are the CP product, the Communications Center product, and the product called QMS, or the Quality Management Suite product. The QMS product today has three capabilities. It's got the ability to record calls. It's got the ability to allow supervisors or managers to evaluate those calls using configurable forms and metrics. And it's got the ability to capture screens. And it's got some business rules that you can set up to allow you to control how screens are captured. Like you could capture the entire agent screen, or if you wanted to only capture a particular window or a particular application that the agent navigates on that screen, like CRM, for example, you can do that. And that way, and then part of the evaluation would be that's synced up with the recorded call, so you can actually watch the agent navigate screens while they're actually speaking to the customer, and the customer is speaking back. One thing that that happens a lot, for example, in retail, is the agent paused the recording when the customer was speaking their credit card number. That's a nice little evaluation of, did the agent handle that properly? There's lots of those examples where you want to be able to pause things because you don't, on the screen recording, you don't want that credit card number to show up. Lots of use cases like that, but screen recording is a key part of the QMS product.
Okay, I've got another one for you here. IVR systems are often built around internal metrics and reporting rather than engaging customers and delivering an improved experience. What resources are available to assist with building quality IVR design?
So that's an excellent question. I think, and you're exactly right. You see a lot of IVR metrics that are about port utilization, kind of systems level things, rather than about what's the customer's experience. So there's a few things that are basic there. How long has the customer spent navigating the IVR menus, and what IVR menus have they navigated? And that data is available and can be reported on. What percentage of customers abandoned, and where did they abandon from the IVR experience? That's an important metric, and that's one that can be reported on as well. But here's the other factor is, one of the things that we are able to do with our Communications Portal IVR, and to some extent with the Communications Center Automated Attendant, is we're able to tell you what's going on, and also tie that to other media types. So in the case of Communications Portal, we talked about the proactive notifications, the appointment reminder, the notification that your part has been shipped, the notification from an energy company that there's an outage in your area, whatever that might be. That can be driven by the IVR itself. And then if there's a reply back to that, or if, say, they want to go to a screen in a mobile application, our IVR system is actually able to connect those endpoints together. So you can go directly from a notification to a mobile navigation session, which is highly visual on the mobile device, and then from there into queue in the contact center, and have all that tied together so you can see reporting on those connection points. That's very important because, again, we're looking at the customer journey, including those self-service components as well as the live service components. So the being able to tie those together is something that, you know, we're able to do, and we're able to connect together in your reports. The future also is around the being able to evaluate text media, and we have about the middle of this year the QMS system we were talking about before. You'll actually be able to evaluate emails and chats, not just as captured screens, but as actual searchable text, and that's another part of the equation as well. So it all ties together in, you know, getting a full picture of the quality of the overall journey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to squeeze one last question in here, John, before we run out of time. Omni-channel is the latest terminology being used by a lot of vendors. How would you suggest senior management and contact centers are better educated around this?
So we have some white papers and such on our website that might be able to help with defining that term. You know, I'd suggest you go online and look at what the analysts are saying about it as well. But we take a kind of simple view of it. When we look at the difference between multi-channel and omni-channel, multi-channel's been around for 15 years. This ability to have a universal queue where I can queue calls and chats and emails and such all in a single queue and manage it with a single system. Omni-channel's step forward is to take those different forms of communication and tie them together into a journey. You know, so if I see the interactions from a customer, I know they're related to each other. If I'm an agent, I can escalate an email to a call and then to a video call. And I can do that in a seamless way using single clicks on the desktop. Now you're talking about the realm of omni-channel where things are interconnected and the customer experience becomes better. To tie it back to the topic of the day, the customer experience becomes a better experience because the customer doesn't have to look at it as I had a bunch of discrete interactions with that business. They look at it as one continuous interaction. And the fact that it migrated across channels is really irrelevant. It just happened, and it was all automated both for the agent and for the customer. The world of omni-channel. It's a little subtle, but the right tools give you that experience.
Okay, thank you everyone for your questions.